Welcome to the Data Coffee Break podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Christian.
If you are passionate about data like us, take a seat, relax, and join us to our coffee break where we discuss all things data.
And remember, there are no filters, no PR.
It's just a real life experience. So let's begin. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. And first of all, thank you very much for all the feedback on this funny project we have on the side. Right, Christian?
Yes, Mark. Yes, it's been really good and overwhelming. The good feedback that we've received.
By how many hours did you reduce your sleep? Lately?
Significantly, but yes. But it's good. Coffee keeps me up.
Definitely. What do we have today as a guest?
I'm super excited for today's guests because today we have someone that has been a professional in consultancy and product management for over 17 years. He has worked as a product specialist and technical product director in companies like Deloitte, Thomson Reuters, PwC, Agent Technologies, among others. He's also the founder of Tennis Betting 365. He holds a degree of the University of Manchester in mathematics and management sciences. And as a product specialist, he has overseen the release of hundreds of features and influenced the direction of products in the natural language processing, or NLP. And he's one of the most enthusiastic Bolognese bloggers. He's an amazing friend, a great colleague, and a proud father of two. And today we have Martin Staniforth. Welcome to the Data Coffee Break podcast.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the introduction.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, yeah. Like I say, I'm a bit nervous. I don't know what's coming, so...
We will be gentle, don't worry.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm quite interested about this blog about the Bolognese. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so there was a bit of a lockdown indulgence. So I work in product management, and the idea is to get to product market fit as quickly as possible, avoid waste, all of these kind of things. And then when you're at home, you ignore all those principles.
Yeah.
And it was just something I started writing and I just couldn't stop. So a lot of interesting stories about the history of Bolognese. And I encourage everyone to go and read it.
And you have nice, obviously, pictures of the dishes. I'm guessing you cooked yourself, maybe, but also nice artworks. Is it yourself?
No, I didn't do the artwork. I my partner Lauren did the artwork, but I did the recipes and learned a lot about Italian cooking along the way.
Amazing. We're going to put the link on the description.
Excellent.
It's a good segue to our conversation today about NLP. We're going to refer to NLP as natural language processing. Can you start it in your views? What is NLP and where do you see use it mostly?
The particular field that I work in is defined by Gartner as intelligent document processing. That whole field can cover anything from OCR through to document extraction, so understanding what's in a document and pulling out information, all the way through to search and search engines. That all comes in the same bucket. But where we focus our efforts in my current employment is around the document extraction component of NLP, taking documents, particularly in the legal industry, the finance industry, and insurance, and pulling out information that might be relevant to our customers.
I'm wondering if you actually know one of my friends who works at Thomson Reuters, is a lead designer, like he's playing about doing NLP projects on also the legal industry, and he was telling me about all the challenges he faced. Do you see like some industry being prominent in that aspect?
Yeah, there's definitely differences across industry. So in the legal industry, you're there to at some level replace a human doing some of that work, or liberate that human from doing some of that work. And in the legal field, they tend to be a bit more protective of that work. They can charge for it for a start, and it gives their legal teams good exposure to problems that they might not otherwise face. Whereas if you go into finance and you may even be looking at the same documents, but in finance, it's much more about cost cutting. So it does vary from industry to industry. And I can what you're saying about your friend does resonate. There are often quite a lot of problems that we face with sovereignty of this data. So quite often these can be quite sensitive contracts, and they have to be negotiated. And before they're negotiated, they can't be in the public domain. So we have definitely come across challenges with getting hold of data, and then also with the understanding of that data. Certainly,
that is quite interesting, because those industries are not necessarily the ones that are ahead of the curve when it comes to cutting edge technologies, right? Do you see a problem for them to adopt these technologies? Does it sound like too, I don't know, intimidating?
It can be. I mean, I think some of the challenges you'll get. I mean, this is enterprise software, so just naturally it has challenges as far as long sales cycles, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I think particularly prevalent is that at some level, someone has to agree to the risk that you're taking on. Now, you may be able to prove that the machine is more accurate than the human who's doing that work, but there's still this barrier that these are new concepts to a lot of the people, particularly in risk departments of these big banks, and that's something you always have to overcome.
When I say NLP, in my mind, I think about like the classic speaking to your phone is going to answer, or asking, maybe considering simply like what Google is starting to do as starting now. It's been quite a few years, like interpreting your questions. Like, is it the most common use cases we see now for interpreting sentences, interpreting information shared, and that's considered as NLP in all cases here?
I think there is probably a very big bias towards the what you'll read about NLP in the press has a very big bias towards the cloud giants, what they're doing with massive data sets and the like. Right. Quite often at the enterprise level, you'll have the problem of small data. So there may not be much of this data around. You may have to make the most use of that data. You may also have problems with the cost of annotating that data. So we have to work with lawyers and paralegals to understand, interpret that data, and make a machine be able to do that as well. So it's a very far cry from some of the stuff that happens with phones being able to talk back to you. It's all in the same field, obviously, but we take a very different, studying some very different problems in that field.
It's super interesting, because I mean it's one of the first time that you might hear that small data is a problem now. It used to be like big data.
It's big data,
yeah, it's true. The data is so niche, or could be so niche, that it's a problem to get hold of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of these documents we deal with, there are a very finite number of them in the world, let alone in a single bank. So give you an example, a collateralized loan obligation. There aren't many of them. They tend to be extremely long, so in the region of about 800 pages of information, very legal, heavy text. And that's, I think, a lot of the NLP that you read about in the press. Maybe go and analyze 1 billion tweets. They're short sentences, there's a lot of them, and you can just churn through them and learn from the big data, whereas what we see, at least in my field, is quite at the other end of the spectrum.
This is looking at, I'm guessing at the moment, in English, or do you handle when you want to mix different languages? You facing some clients who ask, okay, we need to have the analysis done in Spanish, maybe in French, or maybe in a language which is not having the same roots. So it could be, let's say, in Japanese. I'm guessing, a weird challenge to take into consideration here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we can offer. Typically, though, our demand is very much in the European and the US banking clients and insurers, particularly in London. So a lot of our problems tend to be in English, which is good, because for every piece of clever machinery you apply to these documents, you have to have someone who can interpret it. So if you were to go into these other languages, you need to build up your capabilities in foreign language understanding from a human perspective before you can even get into the machine perspective.
I would have said like a simple Google Translate over every text, and after using the English interpretation is not sufficient here, I guess.
Yeah, it's an option.
That is a good point of all of this, right? The human in the loop, to understand jargon. How did you go and tackle those problems in your experience? Like, how do you do that? Is that just literally a person tagging?
Yeah, so like I say, this problem of small data is that it tends to be constrained by we call it could be constrained by budget. You're constrained by some kind of budget, either the cost of annotation, so these lawyers can be expensive, the availability of documents, but it could also be the budget you have on computational resources and how long you have to train with those computational resources. I guess that's another of the differences when you're talking about enterprise machine learning, is that and particularly building products around that. Is you're much more conscious to the budgetary constraints that you're under and working out what's the best thing you can do with your budget. So the example you give of annotation, what you'll typically get is that someone is quite willing to give you an amount of time for annotating data, and they don't really care how much annotation happens in that time. It's a fixed amount of time. If you can double the amount of annotation of a set of documents in that time, then that's a good thing. So you can use NLP techniques that can speed up the annotation process and use that to leverage additional annotations for that data. So, and again, it's one of the things that we have to think about in a product management setting.
Is NLP like really? Is it that a budget when it comes to computation compared to other machine learning techniques for such projects?
It's it's getting pretty big, the constraint, the budgetary requirements you need. So GPT-3, you may have heard this, is one of the large language models.
Okay.
It's somewhere in the region of 170 billion parameters are required to build that model. They can cost millions and millions of dollars to train. So they start to become out of the realm of what you can do without some serious financial backing. And that's another of the things that plays into modern day NLP, is just how big some of these models are getting to understand data. So any written text that's out there on the internet, you could use to train these models, and they're learning simple tasks like I say simple tasks. They're learning tasks like what's the next word in this sequence of words, and what they're doing is they're building a general understanding of language. And what you can do is, once they've been trained, someone's spent all that money on that training, you can then incorporate that as a foundation model in your own stack of NLP, and you may then just have to tweak the task that you're particularly interested in on the head of this model, and then you can leverage all of that learning that's gone into the foundation model. So it's a transfer learning approach to NLP.
Fascinating. Power it can bring.
Quick one. If you're enjoying this episode and our show, please make sure you follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links on the description as per usual.
Also, if you'd like to grow this community with us, think about sharing this episode with a friend or a colleague interested about all things data.
Now, back to the episode.
Have you seen this website called crayon.ai, which transform basically your text into an image?
I have, yes. Yeah, that's a very interesting area. It's known as multimodal NLP. How best to describe it? Let me give you an example. If I was to say, "Hit me, baby, one more time," what do you think?
What to say
about a singer?
Yes, a singer.
You're picturing Britney Spears, aren't you? You already got the melody playing in your head, and it's not just about the text. So you live in a multimodal world where you're constantly learning from not just text, speech, what you see, but it can be all different senses. There are approaches where you can take those multimodalities and combine them into a single model, so that you're now learning not just from, for example, vision, but also from text at the same time. You can do cool things with it. So you can do the things that you've seen with Crayon.ai. Where it's most relevant in my field is that a lot of legal documents, predominantly it's about the stream of text, but there's a lot of visual elements in a lot of documents. And if you aren't incorporating that structure, you may be throwing away information. When we look at multimodal NLP, we are likely to be looking at things like tables and forms, and trying to understand and extract information with those two modes of information that exist within the document.
MLOps, as a strategy, how important is to have that within the organization?
So I can talk quickly what MLOps is. MLOps is really about the learnings that have happened up to this point about how to deliver machine learning project. And it really breaks down into three stages. First of all, The reason that data scientists are called data scientists is because they follow a scientific pattern. They experiment. They find ways not to solve a problem before they find the right way to solve the problem. And throughout that process, they're generating a lot of artifacts, so models, data, and they need to understand how they need reproducibility. So where was that artifact at the given point, so I can always get back to that. So there's that first phase of experimentation. They need to do that as efficiently as possible. The second stage is then when they've got something that works, they then need to get that into a production system as quick as possible, with as few headaches as you can have. It's harder than it sounds, particularly when you've got maybe a legacy system where you have to integrate machine learning into that legacy system. And then finally, you want to be able to, once you've got that model in a production environment, it's being used by users, you want to be able to monitor it, make sure that it's still relevant, it's still, if there's more data available, it's still learning, and making sure that the data you trained that model with is still relevant to the data that's seen in the real world. So that's MLOps. Now, why that's important, particularly for a machine learning company, is the ability to work in that cycle really defines your ability to adapt and your ability to get to the market, get your product out as quick as possible, get feedback, understand if the solution you've proposed is actually going to solve a problem. And really that's the main benefits of MLOps, is that we can have that end-to-end process very clearly managed, and it can allow us to iterate quickly.
But that's one of the best ways I've seen, like someone puts why is important MLOps.
When you speak about the data to stay relevant, this can, for us, make reference obviously as bias in the interpretation of the model, in the recommendation of the model, I guess. In your case, you're really working with those very narrow and not, I don't want to say not too data driven, but a very small number of data. What do you do in this case, like to stay relevant, to avoid such biases in your models?
Yeah, that's one of the components of MLOps that's very important, obviously, in that domain where you have very relatively expensive annotation, and you don't have much of it, and you build models at that stage, but a lot of the value of that model is going to be realized over time, and the ability to incorporate remediations, for example, on your extractions and have them improve in the model is very important. And that's one of the components of MLOps, is being able to manage that cycle of the additional data that comes in. It's relatively expensive to produce the annotations in the first place, but it's slightly less expensive to remediate those annotations. So you want to make as much use of that annotation remediation as you possibly can to build the best models that you can for your particular use case.
So in your opinion, do you think that at some point you are going to be able, or we are going to be able to remove the human from the loop? I'm talking about the end products here.
You're bringing a very hot topic question here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, you think about like Google, for example. Google has had the button, I'm feeling lucky. Okay. Yeah, Google's had that feeling lucky button since day one. Do you ever use it?
I used it when it was there, but
extremely rarely.
Yeah, exactly. Not many people use it, even though you invariably enter your query and then go to the first page. You still want that human in the loop element to your search in Google. And we work with lawyers. Lawyers will review literally everything you put in front of them. So it feels unlikely that we'll ever get away from human in the loop.
Obviously, there is always the topic like, is AI and machine learning going to replace human? Well, a lot of tools I can see out there, or features implemented in tools, are pretty much to help the users to speed up their work, to be able to be more efficient, to be able to be more accurate, rather than just simply replacing them.
Yes. Okay. I can give you a good anecdote. So we've talked about MLOps and how important it is, and naturally you think about very technical domain, very engineers, data scientists. But one of the things that you often need to do in a platform, you need to you need to get non-technical people to have some skin in the game. So they need to annotate data. They need to apply different techniques, different models to understand whether they need to score the models to see whether they're producing the outcome they want. And what you'll end up with is that these non-technical users are entering the world of MLOps without even realizing it. So, they're having to maintain models, they're having to experiment, they're having to understand what the model's doing at any one point. And what you'll end up with is, in our case, is that we get lawyers requesting features of MLOps. And, that's something that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. And it always makes me think that for every time you might say, well, machine learning is going to take a job away, it's going to create another couple elsewhere. It just may be that you get lawyers who are now very sensitive to the mechanics of MLOps. It's a new job, but it's going to be generated off the back of opportunity that ML brings. And so I'm always an optimist in these conversations.
All right.
If we think about our target audience, solution architects, solution engineers, developers, do you have an advice for them, for those that want to get into this area, in the area of machine learning, more in the hands-on or even in the consultancy? Do you have any advice for them on this?
I'd say don't be intimidated by it. I think there's a lot of PhDs in the field, and they work in they work amongst us mere mortals. But there's no reason why an engineer from an engineering background can't add value in the field of machine learning. You still have the same problems with scalability, with all of the things that engineers can bring to the table. So certainly don't be intimidated by things. And there is also certainly a feeling of not being able to keep up. The pace of change is so quick that there's this feeling that you can quite easily get left behind. Again, the PhDs in the field of data science also have these same concerns. So it's just one of those industries where things move so quick.
Incredible.
It's almost impossible to keep up with these things. So the advice would be just get stuck in, really, and learn as much as you can on the job,
and create a betting website on the top of it.
Yeah, exactly. Go. Yeah, so that's the other thing about this, is it's happened at the right time, hasn't it? The software industry, it used to be a lot of activity was happening a long time ago in Silicon Valley, and if you weren't in that club, you might not be learning at the same pace as those people. And then the Gang of Four released a book, and all of a sudden, everyone can leverage that. Whereas machine learning has come along at a time where there's fewer barriers to learning, at least to a certain level, about this field, and there's no end of good content out there. So
fantastic.
That's really good. That's really interesting. As I think everyone listening to this episode is actually learning quite a lot from you, which is great. I'm conscious that we're getting to the top of the hour. So as part of this podcast, for every guest that comes into the show, we have a feature question. The question is, what is the best professional advice that someone has given you? The reason for this is because we want to have a bank of advices for people, so people can refer to them and have a community, and everyone can learn and take the advice from professionals like yourself that are every day working with data.
Cool, yeah. And I one that comes to mind is be famous for something. I can't even remember who gave that advice, but the idea is either internally in your company, or hopefully externally outside of the company, be the person who is famous for something, some knowledge you have, for some project you've delivered. Be famous for that thing, and then exploit that fame, so that people will always come to you for that particular piece of advice or whatever it might be.
Fantastic.
Really good one.
Anywhere we can follow you on social media if you are active?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I drop the occasional nugget of information about what our company's doing. So yeah, please follow along and reach out if you want to hear more.
And we might share your website about the Bolognese for pasta lovers around the audience.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, if you want to talk about Bolognese, tennis, or NLP.
Once again, Martin, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for this. It was real fun. I had a good time.
Thank you so much for your time, Martin. Thank you for sharing all those insights. We hope that everyone learned a lot about NLP today, and see you everyone next Tuesday.
Thanks for listening to this episode. This podcast represents our views and not the ones of our employers.
Our mission at the Data Coffee Break podcast is to inform you and help you grow in this always changing data field.
Follow us and get into the conversation with the community on our LinkedIn page and Instagram.
See you next Tuesday, and until then, keep your data caffeinated.